this rental property didn't go as planned,
Okay.
maybe you couldn't find a renter or whatever, does it have a material effect on your life? Obviously, the liability coverage, you want to make sure there's insurance coverage for it. You want to make sure you have like a separate cash fund if the furnace breaks or whatever, but you also have to enjoy it. And if you don't enjoy it, you can maybe, and when I say enjoy it, like waking up to a call at 11 p.m. or midnight or 1 p.m., 1 a.m., whatever, and having to go do that. Because if you're not going to do it, you can hire a property manager, but a
Sure.
property manager will cost close to, roughly 10% of the rent maybe. So you do have to factor all that in.
So do you look at it from the standpoint, I like a phrasing you just said, material impact on a financial plan. So do y'all look at it from the standpoint that, okay, this rental is ancillary, or do you look at it from the standpoint that we want our baseline covered without the rental? Like where does material play into that? Or is there some kind of rule you use with a percentage of net worth? Kind of getting into the quant a little more with that.
So, and it's very similar to, we have individuals that have just a lot of Apple stock, for example. So the way we look at that is maybe it's 20% of somebody's net worth, for example. And we just look and say, well, if this goes to zero, is your life materially impacted? So, and by material impacted, I'd say like if it goes to zero, can you still put food on the table, pay your property taxes? Like if it just affects your ability to take an extravagant vacation, okay, well, go to Door County, Wisconsin instead of Hawaii.
Is there a hard and fast percentage of net worth you stick to? Do you try to have baseline expenses elsewhere, or is it a situation by situation?
I think it's a very situation by situation scenario. If it's somebody who's never rented before, we're going to be a lot more cautious about that. If it's somebody who has rented for 20, 30 years and knows what they're doing, and they have good renters, or especially if, let's say they're using a property manager and their cash flow is covered, I think we'd be a lot more lenient in saying, hey, you know what you're doing, you've got the backstop of the property manager. But if it's a very fresh, like a rookie situation, you got to be a lot more careful.
Okay.
And to piggyback off of that, we have two distinct scenarios that come to mind with our clients. Is we have one client that is younger, in their low 40s, young 40s, and they have 17 rental properties. And it's majority of their portfolio. I would say it's probably 70% of their investable net worth is in these rental properties. And that is completely different because they have built up the financial capacity or their financial wherewithal to be able to manage those properties. They have a property manager that they have now been really good with, and they have cut that 10% down to 5% because how many properties they manage and things like that. The economies of scale help in that scenario.
And this individual also gets first rights of refusal from realtors, because he's done this for so long.
Exactly. And then we have another individual that came to us the other day and said, hey, should I buy this? And they don't have they don't have a large amount saved in an after-tax brokerage account. If there was a issue with the property, they would have to pull it out of a 401k or traditional IRA, which is not by any means optimal in the financial world. So it is by a situation basis of where the client stands from a financial standpoint, also from an income standpoint, if they have a job, W-2 job, or if they're self-employed, things like that. So Craig, to your point, it's probably situation by situation.
So Alex, this one might be for you, but walk me through that. So that second situation, right?
Yes.
Is maybe we're not ready yet, right? And have that conversation. When y'all look at portfolio allocation and when you work with clients in that space and wealth management, when is maybe a REIT a better fit or an actual rental a better fit? And if you could put your professor hat on for a minute and kind of walk me through that.
Yeah,
I think it'll be real helpful for our audience.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think it all comes down to the risks that you are willing to take and how hands-on you want to be. I know Randy mentioned that a moment ago. If you don't want to be hands-on with the real estate, but you want to have some sort of that in your portfolio, then a REIT is an excellent example, either a non-tradable or a tradable. We would probably prefer the tradable REITs, meaning the open markets, secondary markets, to be able to buy and sell that and have that liquid. Or if you are really hands-on and you want to dive into it, then great. Let's try to start with a starter rental property and see how that goes from there and get your toes in the water and discuss that and what kind of liability protections, things like that need to go. But from a REIT versus a rental property, it all depends on how impactful or how much the client wants to actually put into that property or put into that real estate position themselves. And Randy may have some.
Well, and I think it's interesting. I do think there is like an allure to owning property or real estate just because you hear like, oh, you know, my grandpa bought that house for a nickel back in wherever, and not a nickel, but let's say like you remember what you paid for it. And then 40 years later, you see let's say it's worth, you paid $50,000, and 40 years later, it's worth, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. But you forget in the, like, all the repairs that went in, all the property taxes that went in, and you don't get a statement every single second of the trading day saying, this is what the house is worth. This is what the house is worth. This is what the house is worth. Whereas if you put it in the market, whether it be a stock, a bond, or a REIT, for example, now you get to see it every second of the trading day. And now something that, now it starts to feel like money, even though it's not money.
Okay.
So
I hear you from that
yeah,
front.
Yeah. And it's just not sexy, like buying a rental property. So that's my opinion too.
So taking that and moving a step then forward would be, you know, when you are working with clients and rental properties, do you find they're interested in, you know, a house? Do you find they're interested in, you know, the apartment, the small apartment building? You know, what scale in the retail space do you see?
Yeah, I would say it's a lot of single family homes to start. The individuals that we have that have rental properties have started with a single family house. They have then built up to another single family house, and then another one, and then ultimately go into, let's say, a 4-flat home or a 4-flat apartment building. So I think it starts with a single family residence, and then it starts to build upon there once they get more comfortable into the larger areas, a commercial building, commercial apartment building. I don't think that we've had a client that wanted to have dive in directly to an apartment building all at once or for just to start. But
I would think
well,
that's
the one
a weird
you mentioned,
dive.
The one that Alex mentioned earlier, that individual, the one that owns the 17 properties or whatever, he is looking at apartment buildings, but that's a one-off situation.
But that he has built up that.
Yeah.
He's understood where the properties are, how much it takes to manage those properties, getting the phone calls at 11 o'clock at night to go and fix the leaky toilet, for example, things like that are not the glamorous side of owning those properties.